Hi everyone. This semester I'll be using a system called Proficiency-Based Grading. Many of you have probably heard of or even used systems like mastery grading, specifications grading, or standards grading. Researchers have defined these grading systems and others in subtly different ways in order to study them. But in this course, it's reasonable to think of proficiency-based grading as just another name for this similar group of ideas. Before I get into exactly what I mean when I say proficiency-based grading, let me spend a few minutes telling you what it isn't. From middle school up through my PhD, just about every course I took was graded using what I lovingly call the pile of points system. Under this system, instructors award points to students for various submissions and activities, and a student's final grade is based on the percentage of points accumulated. There are a lot of fundamental problems with this system, and they are thoroughly documented elsewhere. But in this video, I'm just going to explain the two that are most relevant to you as a student. Imagine a student who has earned 80% of the possible points in a course. When I was a student, this was usually a B-. The problem is this 80% can represent a spectrum of different situations. At the extreme ends, there could be a student who has thoroughly learned 80% of the topics, but didn't really understand much, if anything, about the remaining topics. At the other end of the spectrum is a student who understood about 80% of every topic. Here's why the difference matters. Imagine an outpatient surgery center. For the purposes of this example, let's say this center performs 10 different surgeries. Now imagine that they're in the process of hiring a new surgeon and there are two candidates for the job, Alice and Bob. Alice got an 80% on her surgeon's exam, and she can perform 8 of the 10 surgeries flawlessly. But she struggles enough with the other two that she won't even attempt them on her own. If the center hires Alice, they'll have to assign patients who need those two surgeries to other surgeons on the team. Bob also got 80% on his surgeon's exam, but in his case, he gets every surgery 80% correct. That means no matter what case he's assigned, he needs to bring in another surgeon for help at some point during the procedure. Which of these two would be the better hire? I argue that Alice will make a useful addition to the team. She can handle 80% of the patients that come in. And the center's big enough that it's not any trouble at all to assign the remaining patients to other surgeons. It's fair to describe Alice's contributions as a B. Although she's not a superstar, she can clearly contribute to the surgery center's overall mission. On the other hand, Bob can't perform any surgeries without help from another surgeon. Now, of course, everybody does need help from time to time, but Bob can't do anything without help. This doesn't sound like a B to me. Let me put this in a more familiar context. Imagine you're in your final semester in college. The main hurdle standing between you and your diploma is a big final team project. Your project supervisor gives you a choice of 2 students. Alice can independently complete 80% of the tasks for this project. Bob can get any task 80% correct, but will need another team member to come in and fix the mistakes. Who would you want on your team? There's a second problem with traditional grading systems. They're more often than not what I call one and done. If a student doesn't perform well on a given exam or assignment, those missing points often have a permanent negative effect on the final grade. As a result, these traditional grading systems don't provide sufficient incentive for a student to go back and address any deficiencies. It doesn't matter why the student only got 10 out of 25 on the first test, but even if he goes back and learns what he misunderstood, his grade still can't go above an 85. So most students in this situation will try to put the first test behind them and focus on the upcoming assignments in order to maximize their grade by collecting as many points as possible. Now, there isn't anything inherent in the pile of points system that necessitates this one and done type of grading, but that's what most of my teachers did. And I still see a lot of college professors doing the same thing. Now, with those problems in mind, let me tell you how I implement proficiency-based grading and why this system is to your advantage. For each course, I establish a set of learning objectives. These learning objectives represent the things I expect you to have learned by the end of the semester. Obviously, your learning objectives will be different from the example objectives on the screen. Your grade will be primarily based on the number of objectives you meet. Primarily is the key word here. Most of my courses will have additional requirements like perhaps labs or a semester project. I'll discuss those specific additional requirements in lecture. In most cases, you will demonstrate that you have met a learning objective by correctly answering a set of quiz questions. Most courses also have a few objectives that are met in other ways, for example, by completing a project or other assignment. Under this system, you only get credit for learning objectives that you have met. In effect, there's no partial credit. But, and this is the important part, you get multiple opportunities to demonstrate that you've met an objective. In other words, if you struggle with a topic in the course and you don't do well on that quiz, or perhaps you're just having a bad day when you take the quiz, you have the opportunity to go back, fix the deficiency, and have the resulting proficiency reflected in your final grade. In other words, topics are not one and done. You work on them until you become proficient. Better yet, within reason, there isn't even a penalty for needing multiple opportunities to meet an objective. Demonstrating proficiency on your third attempt contributes to your grade just as much as if you demonstrated proficiency on your first attempt. Now, since I'm not using the pile of points system, I don't need to award points for you to pile up. This means that when I give feedback, it will primarily be qualitative, not quantitative. In other words, I'm going to focus on providing suggestions for improvement rather than trying to assign a numeric value to your work, like 7 out of 10 or 8 out of 10 or whatever. Now, you do still need a way of tracking how you're doing in the course. So in addition to the qualitative feedback, I'll also mark your submissions with one of 4 letters, E, M, P, or N. For the most part, your goal is to get an M, which means you met my expectations. You can check off that requirement or learning objective and move on to the next one. If you haven't quite met my expectations, for example, if you're still learning and need some work in that area, you'll get a P for progressing. A P is my way of acknowledging that you're clearly on the right track and you just need to keep working. For example, maybe you just need more practice, or maybe there's just a couple areas of confusion and we need to sit down together and clear those up. If you're still a long way from meeting my expectations, you'll get an N for not yet. If you get an N, it means that it doesn't look like you've made much progress. Either what you submitted is so incomplete that I really can't tell how you're doing, or you're very clearly headed in the wrong direction and I need to help you get back on track. If you get a P or an N, you have more work to do. If we're talking about a learning objective quiz, you need to attempt the quiz again. If you get a P or an N on something like a homework or a project, you need to fix it and resubmit. On occasion, instead of an M, you may get an E for exceeds expectations. E's are my way of acknowledging that I'm particularly impressed with that submission. They have no formal effect on your grade, and many tasks are straightforward enough that there really isn't even a way to distinguish the M's from the E's. So don't worry about how many E's you're getting, just think of them as a gold star for unusually good work. The syllabus contains a more detailed description of this EMPN rubric, courtesy of Robert Talbert. So I've told you why I don't like traditional grading and what I do differently. But why is my use of proficiency-based grading to your advantage? First, you no longer have to learn on a specific timeline. If you find a topic difficult and you're not proficient with the topic when the quiz comes around, you have additional time to learn the material and additional chances to demonstrate what you've learned. As a result, your grade will reflect what you know at the end of the course, rather than partially measuring what you knew partway through. More importantly, this system encourages you to take the time necessary to become proficient in as many topics as possible. As a result, at the end of the semester, you'll have a set of useful skills, even if you still need to work on a few of the objectives, just like our surgeon Alice. In contrast, the traditional grading system tends to encourage students to learn a little about all the topics, which tends to leave you with a lot of parts, but no complete useful skills, like Bob. Let me use Intro to Programming as an example. Here's what I see happen when this course is taught using a traditional grading system. So let's say Bob starts the semester strong, but struggles to understand if statements. He gets a 70% on that test, and then just mentally writes off those 30 points and moves on and tries to learn about loops. However, some of the important concepts from if statements are also needed to thoroughly understand loops. As a result, Bob also struggles with loops and gets a low grade on that test also. Now this pattern continues, where difficulty in one section just causes difficulty in the next, and by the end of the semester his grade is down to a C. But even though he technically passed the course, he can't write any non-trivial program without help. So other than having this passing grade on his transcript, what has the course really done for him? He's not in a strong position to take the next programming course, and he's not really comfortable enough with programming to use it as a separate skill, like as part of a stats course or as part of a research methods course. In contrast, here's what ideally happens with proficiency-based grading. Alice also starts strong and struggles with if statements. After failing to demonstrate proficiency with if statements, Alice takes the time to address this deficiency. She goes back and does more practice. As a result, she demonstrates proficiency the following week, and because she now understands if statements well, she has less trouble learning about loops. Now, learning to program is difficult for most people, including Alice, and she struggles with several other topics as well. But by the end of the semester, she has demonstrated proficiency with if statements, loops, methods, and arrays. But she never does get the hang of objects or recursion. Happens to the best of us. In a very loose sense, Alice and Bob have learned the same amount of material, just distributed differently. However, the important thing is that what Alice learned was concentrated into fewer topics. So now there is a set of programs that she can write confidently. Alice may not have met all of the course's objectives, but she leaves the course with a useful set of skills. She could write some programs in her stats class or her research methods class. And if she focuses on the couple of remaining topics she struggled with, she will likely be successful in the next programming course. Bob, on the other hand, has a collection of facts about programming that he can't consistently and confidently put together into a working program. Now, whether you find this course easy or hard, and whether you learn a lot or a little, I want you to walk away having learned something useful. Something that will help you in another course or will help you at work. And I honestly believe that proficiency-based grading is more likely to help you do that than the traditional pile of points. Now, proficiency-based grading is not perfect. To the best of my knowledge, no grading system is perfect. So here are a couple of weaknesses to watch for. The first is the earliest deadline first problem. Earliest deadline first is a scheduling algorithm that says when you have a bunch of tasks to do, focus all of your attention on the one with the nearest deadline, the one that's due soonest. Human nature being what it is, this is the algorithm that most of us gravitate toward when we have a lot of work to do. The problem is that with proficiency-based grading, the deadlines are, for lack of a better word, softer than the deadlines in courses that use traditional grading. So if you aren't careful, these other courses can steal the time that you need to be spending on this course, and you'll find yourself with an impossibly large pile of work to try to complete at the end of the semester. The second weakness is what I call the snowball effect. It's true that there's no formal penalty for getting a P or an N and having to retake a quiz or resubmit an assignment. But the class doesn't stop and wait while you're working on that deficiency. That means you now have two things to squeeze into your schedule. You have to work on your deficiency and you have to keep up with the course. Now, if you find yourself in this position a couple times during the semester, it's really not a big deal. Maybe you end up with a couple of late nights. Maybe you have to get somebody to cover a shift at work. However, if you don't leave enough margin in your schedule to account for these minor setbacks, the pile of work grows like a snowball. And if you remember rolling big snowballs, they don't grow linearly. Each rotation adds more snow than the last. And so as this work piles up, the amount of effort it takes to catch up feels like it grows exponentially. So, as you figure out your workload for this semester, and you're figuring out what you can and can't take on, remember to leave margin in your schedule so you can address deficiencies when you need to. This is especially important if you're someone who finds college challenging overall. If that's the case for you, assume this course will take 25 to 50% more time than a similar course that uses traditional grading. That is, a course that will let you take your partial credit and walk away if you don't really understand something. The last thing I want to do is go through the fine print, or in other words, revisit some of those asterisks that appeared earlier in the video. In theory, with proficiency-based grading, you get as much time and as many retakes as necessary to meet the course objectives. However, that is simply logistically not possible in the real world. First, the university sets a hard deadline each semester when grades are due. So there is a finite limit to how much time you have to get this work done. Second, I can't grade a semester's worth of work in the last couple weeks of class. There physically isn't enough time to do that, and even if there was, I don't have the mental stamina to grade for 10 hours a day. On top of that, I wouldn't be helping you if I let you put that much work off till the end of the semester. So I don't like to do this, but I do count late days, and late days can lower your grade. The exact number of late days you're allowed varies from course to course, so you'll have to check the syllabus. The goal is to give you enough late days to let you be successful in the course, but not so many that it encourages poor time management. Late days should only affect your grade if you're dropping the ball. For example, if you're not coming to class, or you're not putting time into the course, or you're not staying in touch with me, things like that. If something comes up and you need more flexibility, just ask. but you need to ask in a timely manner. For example, it's not acceptable to disappear for 3 or 4 weeks and then come back and say, well, my boss scheduled me for more hours than I wanted to work, so I didn't have the time to put into the class, and I quit last week, so now I want to catch up. That doesn't work. But if there's an emergency at home or something like that, by all means, let me know so we can make a plan to get you caught up. Another situation where theory doesn't quite line up with practice is with retakes and resubmissions. As much as I would like to, I can't offer an unlimited number of quiz retakes because I simply don't have an unlimited number of quiz questions to offer. Writing good quiz questions is very difficult because they need to distinguish between students who really understand a topic and those who have simply memorized the relevant definitions. Consequently, for any learning objective, especially the more high-level ones, I can only guarantee 3 opportunities to earn an M. Now, if I have enough questions, I'll offer more opportunities. But unless you hear otherwise, you have to assume you may only attempt a quiz-based learning objective 3 times. In general, the first 2 attempts at a learning objective will be part of a regularly scheduled quiz. In other words, according to the timeline that I set for the course. If you need a 3rd attempt, you have to schedule that with me during office hours. What that does is it lets you take that 3rd attempt on your schedule when you're ready, because there's really no point in me making you take a last chance quiz that you aren't prepared for. Similarly, I reserve the right to limit the number of resubmissions of homeworks, projects, and such. My goal is to be as flexible as possible, but there are only so many hours in a day, so there may be occasions where I need to cut off resubmissions. All right, so I hope you have a decent understanding of how I approach proficiency-based grading and why this grading system is beneficial to you. I also roughly outlined how grading works in my course with the feedback and the EMPN and so on. Of course, the details are different for each course, so be sure to read the syllabus and let me know what questions you have. All right, I'm looking forward to seeing you all in class. Have a good weekend, and like I said, let me know what else I should clarify.